Hey guys, welcome back to the workshop. And today I want to do a little show and tell on something that I designed myself, and I call it the Whipsword. Let me put this down before we go over it. I'll just turn it off to save the battery. So over the last few years I made a lot of projects that I didn't really show off as much on YouTube or Instagram, and I just kind of want to go over them together with you guys in this new mini-series that I call Craft and Tell. What I want to do is bring in some crafts that I already made, go over some details that I struggled with and things that I learned, and maybe things that you might find interesting. So in this first episode I want to go over something that is really close to my heart because I designed it myself, the Whipsword. A little bit of backstory about this whole thing. So about a year ago I was kind of fed up with cosplay. I didn't really want to work on anyone else's design, and I wanted to try something designing of my own. So sometimes I get charmed by mechanisms or concepts that really stick with me throughout the years, and this one is kind of an example of that. I'm not sure if you know, but there's this movie called Pacific Rim where these like giant robots with all kinds of weird weapons fight these monsters, and it's a really awesome movie. And one of the robot's main weapons is the sword, and this is kind of my take on it. Sword is not really descriptive of what it is or how it deploys per se. That's why I call mine the Whipsword. My goal was to create something that works and looks like the sword in the movie, but wieldable by a human. Furthermore, the blade is quite different as well. Like in the movie you can see that there's some mechanisms inside of the blade, while I really like the illusion that the sword is one single piece when it's contracted, so that's why I didn't add any details on top of mine. Of course, up close you can see that the blade, even when contracted, is made of multiple segments, but you know, when it's contracted and the light hits it just right and you're like standing a bit further away, it looks like a solid piece of steel that's, you know, ready for stabbing and slicing and looks dangerous, and I don't know, I like that aesthetic and I wanted to make it that way. So before all of this happened, I had to go over a lot of prototypes. First, I bought a lot of electromagnets that I thought that I could have stick to each other when energized and form a rigid group. But yeah, that flopped hard because the electromagnets were just not strong enough and it was just not realistic. But I hadn't given up on electromagnets just yet. I have gotten some solenoids, which is like an electromagnet but with a metal thingy that's running inside it when the electromagnet is energized. And yeah, that didn't work either. So I figured I can't really be too sci-fi with my methods, and I had to rely on something more practical. So I prototyped a little bit in Tinkercad and actually worked out how exactly I want the mechanism to operate. In this design, the blade segments don't have any moving parts in them, so they can be really thin and sharp looking. The contraction of the blade is made possible by a servo motor that's winching the line running through the blade segments together towards the handle of the sword, while the extension is provided by the vast amount of springs in between every blade segment. So as soon as the string is sort of let go, the springs push it back out. And since the springs are the same size, the gaps are the same size. At the core of the blade there's two steel rods going down the middle, and they're made of stainless steel, so that's why the blade is kind of springy and whippy. Yes, whippy is a technical term. Inside each segment of the blade there's two parallel brass tubes for the guiding rods, and then there's the cavity in the middle for the winching line to go through. The line itself is just a braided nylon string. And here's some footage of how I made the individual segments. Everything is handmade, so there are some inconsistencies between piece to piece, and all of the micro adjustments that needed to be done to make the blade run smooth really amounted to quite a lot of hours. The only place where the guiding rods are connected is at the end of the blade and at the tip of the blade, and that sort of helps with the whole warping and twisting. So in the handle we basically have everything interesting about the sword. We have the battery, we have the motor, we have microcontroller, some lights, and some odd shapes, and also the control switch to activate it and disengage the blade. So let's talk about the individual components. For the battery I ended up using a lithium ferrophosphate battery, which is slightly different from a regular LiPo battery. A LiPo battery is rated at 7.4 volts, while a lithium ferrophosphate battery is rated for 6.6 volts. So it's quite a bit lower. Using this kind of a battery, I don't need any voltage controllers or regulators or anything to directly drive the servo motor, which is rated at 6 volts, and the LEDs, the digital LEDs for the animations that are rated at 5 volts. Now for the servo that actually drives the whole winching mechanism, I ended up using a regular servo, but I had to modify it. So a regular servo is capable of moving within a finite range of motion, which is like 90 degrees or something. But that didn't really suit my needs in this project. So I had to modify mine to be able to rotate infinitely. This way, in essence, I just turned it into a compact, high torque, regular DC motor. And over here we have the microcontroller, which controls both the motor and the LEDs of the sword. And the switch in the handle tells it what to do. It has 3 states: extend, neutral, and contract. And I guess it's kind of self-explanatory. Now for the aesthetics of the piece. I knew I wanted to make the top cover look kind of like Jaeger's forearm in the first place. You know, with these sort of big curved surfaces and sharp edges, you know, like a bit bulky, chunky looking. So after a few iterations of design, I decided to stick with this shape. Now, one unfortunate thing is that the body of the servo could not fit entirely within the body of the sword, so it kind of extends a little bit, but you know, it sucks, but it is what it is. I was considering adding some like yellow warning labels or a caution sign around it or something, just you know, to make it look like it's on purpose, but for now it is like that. The most eye-catching part of the top cover has to be the orange bit right here. That's my take on Gypsy Danger's nuclear reactor that he has on his chest, the swirly, the spinny thing. I know I'm not making a direct replica, but I just wanted to add some details from the movie that would remind you of Pacific Rim. The flowing shapes underneath were meant to be as a bit of a juxtaposition for the chunky top cover and this sterile-looking mechanical blade. I just think it's nice to make flowing, organic-looking shapes from something as cold and hard to work with as steel. It's just, I don't know, kind of poetic, I guess. Since at the time of making this I had the blowtorch only to work with the thick steel pieces to manipulate them and join them, I really had a rough time, but I really am happy that I actually ended up doing it, because I think the result is pretty cool. Well, all in all, I think it's gonna make an awesome display piece, and I'm just excited to make stuff do things, if you know what I mean. Like, when they perform some action, it makes them feel more real, you know? It's definitely not combat ready, but it is made from steel, so it's gonna last me a lifetime. Anyways, let me know what you thought about this one. Is there any other cool weapon designs that you would like to see me make? If so, maybe leave a comment down below. I'm always looking for inspiration, so, you know, who knows. So that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, would appreciate muchly. And yeah, I guess see you in the next one. Peace. Is it okay? Oh, okay.